Hello, you are most welcome. I'm teacher Ivan from Wunna Educational Services. I welcome you to our third lesson. We are still looking at the dimensions of a physical quantity. In our first lesson, we saw how we get dimensions of different quantities. In our second lesson, we saw how we check the validity or correctness of any equation using dimensions. In this particular lesson, we shall be looking at how to derive equations or dimensional analysis. That is to say, equations are derived by dimensional analysis by showing how variables affect a given quantity by the use of powers. For instance, in our example 1, we are told that the period T depends on the following: mass of the bomb, length of the pendulum, and acceleration due to gravity. And therefore, our task is to derive the relation between T and LG. So T is for the tension, and this one depends on the mass, length, and acceleration due to gravity. So they want us to derive the relationship between the period and these three factors. But we have a note. Note that dimensions of a constant cannot be given by dimensional analysis, but can be determined using mathematical analysis. So that is very important to take a note of. Otherwise, we have a problem to solve. The problem is to show or derive the relation between the period T, mass, length, and the acceleration due to gravity. But we are told that this depends on these three, and therefore that means that T is directly proportional to m raised to a certain power times L raised to a certain power times G raised to a certain power. It is the power that will show us how each of these three affect T. And therefore, that means that T equals to a constant. We are replacing the sign with a constant. MA, L power B, and G power C. They are the powers that will tell us how each affects the period T. And therefore, when we take dimensions on the left hand side, dimensions of T must be equal to the dimensions of K times dimensions of M power A times dimensions of L power B times dimensions of G power C. The dimensions of period T is time, since it is already a fundamental quantity. The dimensions of K is 1 times the dimensions of mass is M, this is power A, times dimensions of length is still length, that is power B, because these two are already fundamental quantities, times the dimensions of acceleration is L per T squared, this is power C. And therefore, that gives us T equaling to, we simplify, this will be M power A, L power B, and then L power C, T power negative 2C. And therefore, since they are having the same bases, we add the powers according to indices. So that gives us time equaling to ma L b plus c, applying indices, and then t power negative 2c. However, since the dimensions are equal, that means that every quantity on the right hand side is also on the left hand side, but invisible. It is invisible because it has a power that makes it invisible. What do I mean? This is what I mean. If we have mass on this side, it means that we also have mass on the other side. That's what makes the dimensions to be equal. What is on this side should also be on the other side. So that means that we have mass power 0, we have length power 0, and the time power 1. That's why these are invisible. That's why we only see time. This must be equal to mass power A, length power B plus C, time power negative 2c. And therefore we start equating mass power 0 must be equal to mass power A, which gives us A as 0. Then length power 0 must be equal to length power B plus C. That's what gives us 0 equaling to B plus C, and therefore B equals to negative C. Then we come to time power 1 must be equal to time power negative 2c, and therefore that gives us 1 equaling to negative 2c, and that gives us c as negative 1/2. And therefore, since b equals to negative c, that means that it equals to negative of negative 1/2, which gives us 1/2. So we have gotten the powers, and we saw that it is the powers that show us how these quantities affect period t. And remember, our general equation was t equals to k ma L power b and g power c. So it is time we apply the powers, and therefore we say from period t equaling to k m power a, L power b, and g power c, but we've gotten a as 0, b as 1/2, and c as negative 1/2. And therefore it is time to substitute for the powers and derive the equation. That gives us k, since it is m power 0, L power 1/2, and g power negative 1/2. That means that t equals to k into m power 0 is 1, so we ignore that, over g power 1/2. This negative takes g down, which gives us k, the square root of L over g, because 1/2 shows square root. So therefore the equation is t equals to k root of L over g. So k is a constant, and probably it is always 2 pi. So that is how we derive equations using dimensional analysis. Please, I beg you to also try out. We have examples. We have example 2, which says that use dimensional analysis to show how velocity of a transverse vibration of a stretched string depends on its length and mass and tensional force F in the string. So I would like you to derive the equation of the velocity depending on the length, mass, and tensional force in the string. Still, we also have number 3, which says that the viscous drag F on a small sphere of radius A falling through a fluid of coefficient of viscosity. This is the symbol for coefficient of viscosity, with a velocity v is given by F equaling to K A, which shows radius. This shows coefficient of viscosity. This shows velocity. They want us to use the method of dimensions to find the values of x, y, and z. So you try those two numbers for your own practice. Otherwise, you can also comment with your solution so that we share together as we learn together. Otherwise, that will mark the end of dimensions of a physical quantity. However, on top of these two numbers, I would also love to add on some few numbers from checking the validity. Remember, we saw two uses of dimensions was checking validity and deriving the equation. So try also these ones. You check the validity of these equations. Otherwise, I beg to pause from here. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell such that you get notified whenever we are having a lesson and we learn together as we enjoy together. I'm Teacher Ivan. See you next time.